Good afternoon. My name is Bobby Brownlee, and it's my privilege to introduce the 2017 candidates for our Board of Directors. On the first Saturday in March, Pecan Plantation Owners Association will elect 3 new members of the Board of Directors to join the 6 continuing members. Today, we have the opportunity to meet the 7 candidates for those 3 places. Each candidate will present his or her perspective of governance for our association. Each will give an overview of his or her background, qualifications, and plans for achieving goals of the association. Candidates, each of you has 5 minutes to present your plans. We will signal you when we have 1 minute remaining. The candidates will be appearing in alphabetical order, beginning with Mr. Roger Eads. Mr. Eads. Mr. Eads, a Navy veteran whose background includes leadership in both business and community, currently serves on the PPO Finance Committee. Mr. Eads.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a great opportunity to be here today to spend some time with you and just basically talk about briefly myself, what I feel about the Board of Directors, and what I feel possibly be some areas that we could make some changes as needed. As indicated, my name is Roger Eads. I've lived here in Pecan approximately 4 years. My wife, she teaches at UTA. She's a doctor of nursing. I've been retired for several years. I was in the insurance business for over 35 years. 30 of that year, I was on my own business. As it indicated, I'm currently on the Finance Committee, and it's given me a great background in budgeting and working with the board and working with management and also with the committees on items that are important to us to maintain this beautiful facility. Board of Directors is a very important position. They are basically the leaders. They are your representatives. They are your mouth to tell what needs to be done and what you feel needs to be done in the community. They have a huge fiduciary responsibility with over $6.5 million worth of income coming in and a huge maintenance and a huge facility to take care of. So it is a large responsibility, and if elected, I would certainly do my best to fulfill that. A couple of areas that I would want to talk about possibly is, first one would be the communication. There seems to be several members that they don't feel that they don't know what's going on. They don't feel like they're being talked to about activities that are going on. The board is started, it's meeting in the evening, where basically some town meetings, so people can be aware and ask questions if they have some misunderstandings about some things that are going on in the community. And I applaud the board for working on that, and I would say we need to continue that and look at other areas to be sure that the membership is getting the communications that they need. Another area that we're currently working on and being on the budget or being on the Finance Committee is the flooding and the drainage problem we had. That's been a problem for years here. You know, you can't continue to build like we've built and continue to build in the future and change the landscape and not have flooding and draining issues. We currently have probably $500,000 that we are working on current projects, and we have gone out and we're looking now to look even further out to look at areas that this could potentially become a problem. So it's in those 2 areas that I see especially that we need to continue to work with the board, and they're looking at both those now, but I would certainly press those issues if elected. Again, I appreciate your time, and I would be honored if I was elected as on your Board of Directors. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Eads.
Thank you.
And would you ask Mr. Liddell?
I will.
Mr. Ron Liddell, retired from the United States Air Force, currently serves on our Safety and Security Committee and the Communications Committee as well. Mr. Liddell.
Well, hello there, Pecan. Nice to be here today. I'd like to tell you a few things about myself and some of the things I hope to bring to the board and to Pecan if I'm elected. I grew up just up the street in Weatherford, Texas, and went to high school and college there. On to the University of North Texas, where I got degrees in mathematics and physics. And then I took off and joined the Air Force and had a long and fruitful career there, primarily flying aircraft. After I retired from the Air Force, I worked in industry and also had my own business for a number of years until I woke up one day in California and said, I really need to get back to Texas. and that's what brought me back here. I knew about Pecan many years ago, and I look forward to moving here. There are three things I'd like to bring to Pecan if I'm elected, and those three things are stewardship, better communications, and being community-minded. Let me briefly explain each of those. By stewardship, I mean being a good steward of our resources, both our financial resources and our physical resources. I think that is vitally important to the financial well-being of our community. As far as communications go, I would like to see some better two-way communications in our community between the board members and the committee members and the rest of the community. I myself, I think I'm the only candidate for the board who has a dedicated Facebook page where you can contact me or take one of my surveys, have an email. If you're not computer literate, give me a phone call, write me a letter, send a carrier pigeon out my way on Ravenswood Road. I'll answer you. I want to hear from you. I'm not going to discuss any of the current issues, but I will tell you one thing I'd like to do to perhaps solve a recurring issue we have. And that is, I'd like to establish an asset maintenance program, amenity maintenance program, where we actually have a checklist of so we can review our facilities, determine what maintenance needs to be done, get them scheduled in a preventive maintenance manner so we don't have this pile of deferred maintenance that generally winds up costing us much more money. Folks, I appreciate your time, and I certainly would appreciate your vote. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Liddell. And would you ask Mr. Nyman to come in, please?
I will do that.
Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Joel Nyman, who prior to his retirement spent more than 40 years in information technology. Mr. Nyman.
Hi, my name is Joel Nyman. I've been a resident here in Pecan for 4.5 years now. I moved here from San Antonio, Texas to a more quiet, tranquil, beautiful place, and have come to love it over the last 4.5 years and have no desire to leave. But I do have a desire to serve this community as I see my over 40 years of experience in the IT systems information area as a person now that thinks outside the box. All my career was thinking outside the box. How do I please management with systems design and with solving problems within companies, and how I please the users, the people that actually have to use the systems, and find the balance between and listen to all sides of arguments and come up with a resolution of a system that actually benefits the company. I want to apply this outside the box thinking to the board here in Pecan Plantation. I am not a yes, yes, yes guy, and I am not a no, no, no guy. I ask, when something comes up for me, I ask why and how, and the discussion goes from there to come to a reasonable solution. I consider my approach that I've used for 40 years, both in my professional career and in my personal life, as looking at things with common sense. It doesn't make a difference how much research and reading and everything else you do if you can't take that research and you can't take that due diligence that you do and turn it into a common sense solution. I see some problems within Pecan. Some of you know me as the bearded guy that has been filmed before at board meetings. I've been involved in trying to create a traffic safety and security plan in here to improve the security and traffic safety within Pecan. I think it's sorely lacking at this moment, and I think we need changes. Some of the changes that I've been pushing has been having a professional firm come in here and look at our streets, since we've grown to 7,000 plus residents and 3,000 plus homes, and make recommendations for what are the proper speed limits in here? What are the proper other situations that we can make this community safer for a lot of the new families moving in here with children, a lot of the grandchildren of older retirees in here, the people with golf carts, the people that walk, etc., etc. But I'm not a one-issue candidate. I also want to bring some fiscal responsibility and some outside-the-box thinking to some of the things that we approve in a budget process, and then for some reason, because they came out of a committee and they got approved in a budget process, it's like the holy grail that it must be spent. That is not always the case. Sometimes other priorities come up after the budget process is done and the budget is set, and something happens that we need to divert some resources and put something that is not considered to be a safety issue or a now issue of any type, where we don't put some of the less important issues, aside and take care of those first. This is what I hope to bring to the board and to bring to the residents of Pecan Plantation. I will always be open to suggestions from the residents. I will always explain why I voted a certain way or why I voted against something. I would like to have your vote. I would like to be able to bring my experience and my way of looking at things to this community, and it's very important to me as I live here, and I know it's a lot of hours and time, and I'm willing to spend that time because I think that I can help this community grow and prosper. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Nyman. And would you ask Mr. Sprinkle to come?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Vincent Sprinkle, who is a former Tarrant County Court at Law judge and has provided leadership in many civic organizations. Mr. Sprinkle.
Thank you, Billy. My name is Vince Sprinkle. I'm married. My wife's name is Susan, and we have a son named Brant, and his wife's name is Brenda, and we have a granddaughter named Bailey, and they live in Dripping Springs. And one of the reasons we moved down here to Pecan Plantation is so we could be about an hour closer to them. Pecan Plantation is one of the best kept secrets in the Metroplex. We fell in love with it instantly when our realtor brought us down here from Saginaw to look around. My background is that I grew up in Arlington. I went to Arlington High School. I graduated from UTA in 1972 with a degree in government. I went to Oklahoma City University School of Law and got a law degree there. I practiced law in Fort Worth for 12 years. And then in 1988, I was appointed as judge of Tarrant County Court at Law No. 3. That's a county civil court. They handle things like car wrecks and contract disputes, eminent domain cases, things like that. And I was on that bench for almost 23 years and retired in 2010. My wife and I moved down here to Pecan Plantation in December of 2014. And as I said, we fell in love with it instantly. It's hard to improve on near perfection, which is what we consider Pecan Plantation. But there are some things that I would like to accomplish or like to see the board accomplish. First of all, we live in 2017, and the technology we have available to us is phenomenal, yet we can't get decent cell phone service in many parts of Pecan Plantation. And I understand there have been efforts in the past to try to improve the cell phone service in Pecan Plantation, and I would like to see the board pick up those efforts again and see if we can't get something done. We live right in the middle of Ravenswood Road at 9201, and even with a microcell, there are days when we can't make phone calls with our cell phones. So that's one of my main goals in serving on the board. Also, in the 2 years we've lived down here, I think there could be some improvements in the way the restaurant is run. I think there could be some improvements in the hotel rooms. We've actually stayed in the hotel rooms a few nights because we had some water damage in our house. And again, the Wi-Fi service and the television service in the hotel rooms leaves a little bit to be desired, and they might be more marketable than they are now if they would improve those two things. The restaurant service has improved considerably since we moved here in December of 2014, but I think there could be some further improvements. And also, I understand the board has approved expanding the 19th hole, and refurbishing it, and I'm on board with those efforts. I think that's a good idea. Other than that, I think I have served on a lot of the boards of a lot of charitable organizations and nonprofit organizations, and I was on the board of the East Fort Worth Business Association that was dedicated to the improvement of the business community and life in East Fort Worth. I was on the board of the East Fort Worth YMCA. I think I have a wide range of experience that I would bring to the board. I'm a fiscal conservative, and I think it's the primary function of the board to, in a fiscally conservative manner, try to meet the needs of the citizens of Pecan Plantation, and that would be my ultimate goal serving on the board. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Sprinkle.
Thank you.
And would you ask Mrs. Smythe to come in? I'm also happy to introduce Mrs. Darlene Smythe, an educator who has lived in Pecan for 3 years and has served on several association committees and is active in Woman's Club. Mrs. Smythe also has a legal background. Mrs. Smythe.
Yes, we moved to Pecan 3 years ago to be with grandchildren who lived in Crescent. Then we discovered that our son was going to move to Colorado. Well, we had already settled here, so we're still here. My background was in law for 15 to 20 years, criminal law and family law, and then I decided I would become an educator, so I taught high school for 13 years. When we moved here, I decided I would become semi-retired. Well, semi-retired was making me crazy, so I decided to get involved in the community, both here in Pecan Plantation and in Granbury. I was initially in the Sports and Rec Committee and in the Newcomers Orientation Committee. And that's when I learned that there are a lot of ins and outs in living in a gated community. So I became more involved, although I was still teaching at Hill College. Now I am an active participant in the Women's Club, the Granbury Newcomers, the Opera Guild, and I currently serve on the Entertainment Committee. We were responsible for the terrific party at Mardi Gras 2 weeks ago. And I am active on the Food and Beverage Committee. And being on the Food and Beverage Committee gave me an opportunity to really see the ins and outs of dealing not only with the Food and Beverage Committee in the workings of the 19th hole and the Brazos Room and so forth, but I actually began to get a feel of what happens when false and misleading information is disseminated through the social media outlets available to us here in Pecan. So once I determined that there was a lot of things I didn't know about the mechanics of running a gated community like Pecan, that's when I decided I was going to make a run to be on the board. My objectives are to offer fresh eyes on the committee and the board because I don't know about the infighting or the problems developing between the board and the community. So I believe that I will be fresh eyes with a new perspective. Areas of interest are still about the food and beverage. I think there are areas that could be improved in that, although the food and beverage service has improved greatly since this committee was revitalized this year. So my hope is to be an active participant in the board, paying attention to what's going on in the community and offering an image of being a go-between between the community, the members, and the board that will all work successfully together.
Thank you, Mrs. Smythe. And would you ask Mr. Turner to come in?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Mr. Doug Turner, a professional golfer and currently an employment consultant for the Professional Golfers Association. And he also has wide experience in international mission projects. Mr. Turner.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I appreciate it. I guess it's been about 2 weeks now since we've begun this journey running for the board, and most of the people I've met on the pickleball court or in my neighborhood have said you're crazy. But the reality of it is, if you knew my wife or you knew me, you'd know that we were people who serve. And so when we moved to this great community in July, one of the things that we noticed was that there was not a lot of people like me, meaning still working and a little bit younger, even though I'm 53 with 11-year-olds. And we decided, you know what, we kind of got there in a crazy way, but one day she walked and said, you ought to run for the board, and I'd already been thinking about that. So that was kind of a fascinating. We've been married 31 years. I was like, okay, well, we're in. So I signed on the dotted line to run for the board with no real agenda other than I think I have a unique background and perspective. I have currently worked for the PGA of America from 1990 to 2011. I was in the golf business in a couple of various capacities. The first 8 of those years I was a golf professional and general manager. The last one was as a general manager for Club Corp. Won some awards running one of their daily fee operations outside of Austin. And then was fortunate enough to be hired by the PGA of America in 1998 as an employment consultant. I covered Texas for 2 years, 98 to 2000, and then we expanded from 7 consultants to 9, and I did that until 2011, at which time we just doing something crazy. In 2005, we'd adopted twins from Guatemala, and really, prior to that time, really didn't know about the plight of orphans around the world, and so that kind of planted a seed. If we ever have an opportunity, let's go do something to help the orphans of the world. And so in 2011, I quit the PGA, we sold everything we had, and we moved to Honduras to live in the mountains and work with the abandoned and orphan children of Tegucigalpa, Honduras. So it was a great experience. We thought we'd be there 4 years. My wife is a college professor and was actually recruited from there to go to John Brown University, which is in Northwest Arkansas. It's a faith-based, private Christian school, about 1,500 traditional students and another 1,000, 2,000 non-traditional students. Incredibly good educational institution. And so when she was contacted by them to work, I was fortunate enough to land a spot at the Soderquist Center for Leadership. And that was, Don Soderquist was the COO of Walmart. And when he retired, he founded the Soderquist Center for Leadership, and I was a facilitator, project manager for them for 5 years. And then most recently, Bill Keys, who was the employment consultant from 2000 until last year, retired from the PGA, and so I was fortunate enough to be hired back and could choose anywhere we wanted to live in Texas. And we looked around and checked out cities, Tyler and North Fort Worth and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, and having lived in Austin and Fort Worth before, they were high on the list. But when we came and visited my parents here in Pecan, there was something about it. And of course, my 11-year-old twins, we were here to visit, and they went to the junior golf, tennis, swim camp, and immediately had some connections. So it was a great opportunity to kind of see the community as a consumer before we moved here. So we started looking, and we hired Cindy Perry as a real estate agent. She helped us find a great fixer-upper here in Pecan. So we signed on the dotted line, and here we are. One of the things that's fascinating about working for the PGA is I come in contact with lots of clubs. Every year I work with about 40 clubs a year in some capacity. Those clubs could be municipal, daily fee, university, high-end private member-owned clubs, 18-hole, 54-hole, 9-hole. They're all over the map, and also homeowners associations. And so having come in contact with a lot of homeowner associations and helping them find general managers, director of golfs, director of instruction, head pros, I've had a chance to experience life in some of these other communities a little bit. And so I thought it would be foolish of me not to bring my experience to bear to this great neighborhood that I now call home. So open to talk to anybody anytime. I work out of my house, so I'm pretty flexible and would love to visit with you, and I would really appreciate your vote. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thanks.
Our next candidate is Mr. Joe Hartman, who has lived at Pecan since 2012. He currently chairs the Marina Committee. Mr. Hartman is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and has extensive background in leadership and in community service. Mr. Hartman.
Hello, I'm Joe Hartman, as she stated. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what I think our future is here in Pecan Plantation. I can tell you right now that I think it's very good. But before I do want to take a moment of silence for Carol Cotton, who was one of our great community leaders and was a great person to be around. I pray for Ron as he goes through this horrible transition of having his wife with him for over 50 years and now having to learn to be alone. But unfortunately, we must move on and talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Pecan. As Bobby stated, I have lived in Pecan for a little over 4.5 years. I have been part of the Marina Committee for 4 years. Been the chairman of that committee for 3.5 years. The roles that I play have been watching the board, briefing the board, going to different committee meetings, and talking to different groups within the community on trying to make the marina a better place for our community. That's one of the amenities that we have, and I think we should all take advantage of it. What you have here with an establishment that was started in 1972 is a combination of old and new. You have the new subdivision parts that are being built requiring drainage and all the things to be blended in to the systems that we have ongoing. Now, one of the projects over the last year, 2 years, has been to redo our drainage network so that when we have severe rains like we have had in the past year, that we have less flooding and the water goes into the river rather than into our homes. So that is one of the major current projects that we have ongoing. I want to talk a little bit about the methodology I use to decide on what I think and support. The wise old man of the past, in the 1700s, there was a person by the name of Ben Franklin. He developed a method for making decisions which I find to be very useful. I've used that all the way from my being an E1 in the Army to when I was a Lieutenant Colonel Battalion Commander. It is the Ben Franklin square method. And what you do is put down the pros and the cons. And with that, I'm able to evaluate, and by putting them down in writing, I'm able to use those to guide me to make a better, concise conclusion on what I want to do. The best point of that is that I'm always working toward what is best for the total community. I'm not too interested in particular groups. I always am looking for what benefits our total community. We have several projects in the future that are coming up, and some of which are on the very ballot coming up this March. And one of that is the Fitness Wellness Center. And it's going to be important for all of us to put our votes on whether we are for or against it. But it is important that we exercise our rights to vote. Another project that's a little bit further on, it's coming, is the widening of the main gate. During peak traffic times, the traffic can back up pretty badly into the main gate, or the east gate as it's now called. The roads there need to be repaired. The infrastructure on that whole area needs to be reworked and is on the agenda to be done in the next year. That, of course, is dependent on money. One of the things we have to walk about is to be careful of is that we don't overspend our resources. We always want to have a reserve so that if things go south and the construction slows down, that we have the money to continue to maintain and keep us at a high level that we're at this time. I really don't want us to imitate some of the other communities in the area. By doing my Meals on Wheels route, I've been exposed to many different areas in Hood County, and 99% of which, other than Pecan, I don't want to live in. They're showing age, they're showing wear down, just general disuse and not paying attention to details. Future plans long term. One of the topics that we're looking at is the third entryway. We know for a fact that as we grow, that the traffic congestion coming in will continue to grow as well. And so that we need to look at a relief for that. That's an ongoing project that has many challenges ahead of it and will probably take a couple or several years to do. But at least the board is looking at it and trying to work ways to accomplish that. Excuse me. The back gate project, the Garden Club has gracefully taken on that project, and whatever help that we can give on doing that as volunteers that are doing this to help that project along. So if you can, donate your time or at least donate a little bit of money to help pay for the funding of that. Every volunteer hour that we spend as a HOA member helps keep our budget and keep our fees at where it is. We have one of the best homeowner rates of any place in the country and have the best amenities for that. So I strongly encourage that everybody come out and do their part and help us help ourselves to be the best community that it is humanly possible to have here. I think Pecan is great, and I hope we all will continue to do that. Thank you very much. Come out and vote. That's it.
And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Thank you, board candidates, for your dedication to Pecan Plantation and your willingness to share your time and your expertise in service to our community. Thank you again.